name is Olivia Wood, and I did my capstone presentation on the Toledo Strip. So what I'll be talking about in this presentation is I'll introduce the conflict over the Toledo Strip and what it was, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, what it established and how this played a role into the conflict, Michigan's battle for statehood, and the outcome of the conflict, so who ended up with territorial rights over the Toledo Strip, and then just concluding anything and my personal takeaways after the presentation. While introducing the Toledo Strip, who this conflict was between, when it was, and why. So, who this conflict was between Michigan and Ohio, but at the time, Michigan was just a territory. We had not been admission to the Union quite yet, but Ohio was already a state. And both Michigan and Ohio had claims over the Toledo Strip. And this took place during 1835, and it was also known as the Toledo War, which is kind of misleading because although we do call it the Toledo War, it wasn't really a war. There weren't any battles. It was essentially just Michigan, Ohio, and Congress kind of debating and conflicting over where this piece of land that the Toledo Strip would go to. And why this was such a big deal was the Toledo Strip kind of was in a prime location. It was directly connected to the newly completed Erie Canal, and which was also connected to the Great Lakes and the entire East Coast. So because of this location, the Toledo Strip was set up to be a major shipping center for goods, and whoever received territorial rights over the Toledo Strip, whether it be Michigan or Ohio, they would be bringing in larger revenue due to trade. So the land was pretty desirable for both Michigan and Ohio, so that's kind of what started the conflict. Next, introducing the Ordinance of 1787 and what it established. So the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 essentially established that several new states would be drawn around the Great Lakes, and this included both Michigan and Ohio. And based on these lines that were established, the Toledo Strip was to go to Michigan. And however, these lines were based on an unreliable survey that was done at the time, so Ohio had claimed the land as well. So at this point, both Michigan and Ohio had claims over the Toledo Strip, which kind of started the conflict over the piece of land and where it would end up going into in the end. Michigan's battle for statehood and how the conflict played a role in this. So, first of all, the United States Congress had stated that before Michigan would be allowed statehood, the conflict over this Toledo Strip had to be resolved. So this postponed Michigan's admission to the Union because it was hard for Ohio and Michigan to agree on where this Toledo Strip was to go to because, like I said before, the land was so desirable to both areas that they both wanted it. So coming to terms with an agreement was hard for both lands. And then Michigan had attempted statehood in 1833, but unfortunately this attempt was successfully lobbied against by an Ohio congressman. So what Ohio had said after this attempt was that Michigan had to agree to Ohio's version of the boundary line before they would be allowed statehood. And what Ohio's version said was that the Toledo Strip would go to Ohio. And since Michigan did not agree to this, Michigan did not become a state at this point. So after that, Michigan had petitioned to form a state government in which they established a version of a Michigan Constitution. At this point, the Constitution said that Michigan would be allowed only a small part of the Toledo Strip, and that was the port of Lake Erie. So this version did allow Ohio quite a big chunk of the Toledo Strip, but again, Ohio did not like this version. They wanted the entirety of the Toledo Strip, so again, they protested against, and this petition to form a state government by Michigan was unsuccessful again. The outcome of the conflict, so which state had ended up with territorial rights. I'm sure most of you know this living in Michigan, but let's move on anyways. So, Ohio was finally awarded with the Toledo Strip, but this did only happen after Michigan was forced to give up its claims on the land. So, like I said before, in order for Michigan to be allowed statehood, they did have to give up its claims and give it to Ohio. So, that is what happened, and Michigan did become the 26th state of the Union. And in exchange for this, we were given the western part of the Upper Peninsula. So prior to this, the state of Michigan did already have part of the Upper Peninsula, but then after statehood, like I said, we were given that western part. And at first, people did not like this idea because they didn't really see the Upper Peninsula as of use to Michigan. But this opinion changed after we started seeing the profits the state earned from vast resources in the Upper Peninsula, such as copper and iron. So, although we did not come out with the Toledo Strip, we did get the Upper Peninsula. Concluding on this presentation, I'm just going to talk about my personal takeaways for a second and just a little bit about what I learned. So starting with this project at the beginning of the semester, I didn't really know what I wanted to do my topic on, so I kind of just picked the Toledo Strip because that's what we were learning at that point in the semester. So I didn't really know anything about this whole conflict prior to this project. I just knew that Toledo was a part of Ohio. So I was kind of blind going into the project, so everything in this presentation is new knowledge for me, which is pretty cool. So I did learn a lot about the whole calling this conflict the Toledo War, and I use that with air quotes since it wasn't really a war, it was just a boundary dispute, and why the Toledo Strip was so desirable because of its economic importance. And it was really cool seeing Michigan's timeline to statehood and all of the events leading up to finally becoming a state. So I did really learn quite a bit doing this project, and it was really cool. So thank you all for watching, and have a good summer.